hello, everyone. You're joining Timothy White. He is the Associate Director of Res Life and Community Standards. And Tim, if you'd like to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Yeah. So thanks, John, for having me on this podcast this morning with you. Hopefully it's morning everywhere where everyone's listening. If not, good afternoon, good evening. As John said, I'm our Associate Director of Residence Life and Community Standards. I started working at CUCA August 2009, just as a resident director for Harrington and Blythe Halls. And then slowly progressed, up into the ranks of Res Life and the Student Affairs Administration, and so eventually became our assistant director of Housing Residence Life, and still a live-in resident director. And then this past November, shifted roles a little bit. Where this past academic year was my last live-in staff and last live-in position at the college. And so shifted really into the full role of associate director, and now I live off campus right in the Penyon community. So still pretty local, but no longer a live-on position or personality at the CUCA campus.
And there's kind of an understanding you need to have with student affairs, right? Because there's different levels to people that are in Res Life. That's like a whole new world, and then people who are more the administrative type, like, all right, well, this is how we actually are running things for the incoming housing selection and whatnot. Do you want to kind of share on those different types of positions?
Yeah, so the cool, so if you look at even our dean of students, John Accardi, Jonathan Accardi, he started off as a resident director at the college when he was first hired. And so that from a housing residence life, conduct and community standards role, at the top you have Bob Brophy, who's our director of housing and residence life, and that is a very much an administrative role, but also very much on boots on the ground, tied and back to our resident assistants and our students, very much an active persona on campus when he started. And then you kind of go right into the next level under him, which would be me as our associate director. And then we have Maria Bowen, who is our resident director. So she's a live-in professional staff member, as I have been in the past. And so she lives in Davis Hall. That is where her residence is on campus. So that's her year-round home. Just as a student would have their, a home in their residence hall room, their apartment on campus, or if they're a commuter student, they would be living, in their home off campus. And then under that, we have some newer positions to the college environment. The newest one we started this past year, called our graduate assistant resident director. And so Stuart Carmichael Green was our master student this past year in management, and he did a full year internship and an appointment with us, an assistantship. And then Garrett Stauffer, who just graduated, he's going to be our new graduate assistant this year. So he's a live-in professional again. His residence is in Strong Apartments, where I used to live, and so that would be his year-round home, but then be connected to, potentially this year he might be connected to like the upperclassmen areas of campus and being a resident director, point person for those areas. Underneath the graduate assistant position is our head resident assistants, our HRAs. And so the cool thing with that position, that has been going on for, this will be the fourth year of that position on campus, which is really cool because it really, in my eyes, is a student resident director. And so it really gives them the opportunity to, if they're interested in that higher ed field, if they're interested in really just, I really enjoyed being an RA, but I want to get that expanded role into that concept. It gives a student a really great opportunity that was an RA, the opportunity to grow within our field and department. And then underneath the HRAs would be our resident assistants. So any rising sophomore above can apply to be a resident assistant, and kind of join our department, our team, our family. And again, the RAs are those student leaders right within a residence hall, and so they're developing and building that community, putting out programs, connecting you to resources. In a sense, they're part of that Velcro that helps get you connected to campus, but then also helps make that home for you, that home away from home. And then really underneath that is the students, as our residents, that's the integral part. We wouldn't have a job without them, and that makes that's the lifeblood of the campus, and so that's, I always kind of, it doesn't really, in my eyes, it doesn't end with the RAs, because, that foundation for us is our residents, and so they're an integral part of, why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and, what we do.
Happy campus, happy life, right?
That's right, exactly. That can be used in other facets of your life too.
Yeah. So we're talking here today about time management, right? And you're one that is known for deadlines and housing selection and so forth. How do you deal with deadlines? How do you try and stay on top of things?
Yeah, I think, as a student to an administrator to a professional, you're going to have deadlines, throughout, your current life, your future life. I'm sure you've had it in your past life. And so I think for me, for deadlines, it's important to, look at the priorities, like what needs to get done. When does it need to get done? That's obviously, the time of that is important. Who does that, what's the audience that's, that project or priority or deadline is, meeting? Is it something for, our students, where, okay, housing selection, we want to make sure that's up and running, and getting that ready to go.
It is a process.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, process is a beautiful word to say, because it's, it's an evolved, we're a residential campus. And so, we want to honor that residency requirement that we instill in our handbook and in our, in our students. But there's also sometimes maybe that, a student meets, the way to be accepted from that residency. And, they may be a local commuter. They might be, 23 years or older. They, may have some kids themselves. They may be married. They may have something where we can't accommodate, their living on campus. And so, I think it's one, knowing your audience is super important for me in residence life, is that you got to know who you're talking to and who you're interacting with to learn how to best support them. So I think, in meeting deadlines for myself, it's knowing that audience, I think, is super important. I think it's prioritizing what needs to get done first, that's going to be important. And then I think, it's looking at, what I think, this might tie into one of our later questions, too, but learning how to delegate, and understanding, okay, I don't have to do everything myself. I may want to, and I may want to have that follow through for our students, because that's what they've come to expect. Or they're like, oh, I know I can go to Tim and get what I need. It's like, well, wait, that's true, and I appreciate that. But this other staff member can do this exact same thing, and it might be good to have that extra set of resources that you can add to your toolbox, or the people that you surround yourself with, to know, oh, well, Tim can do it, but oh yeah, this, they can do it over here too. And it's like, oh, now I have both supports in my life. And so I think delegation has been something that, I think it's been important for myself, for me to learn, kind of throughout my life, from, if I look back at Boy Scouts all the way, till now, like that delegation, I think, has become an important part of it, because I'm not, I'm only one person, but I have a team that can support me, whether they're above me or below me, in the hierarchy. I think that can, really support, not only myself, but then in turn our students as well.
Yeah, that delegation, you're kind of, I would say, lucky to have that. Be able to have that, because when you hear your name on campus, you're like a jack of all trades. So that's always good.
Good. I think it's when you were first asking this question, John. I think I was like, well, it's funny because John's with your role within student affairs as one of our student workers and really paraprofessionals within the office. You sit right outside of my office. So I think you've gotten the whether it's a blessing or a curse to see, like, my calendar schedule at times, or like, if I've tapped, you for help and support and projects, and, and kind of the banter that we've been able to have, especially, this past year. But yeah, I think it's definitely, I've not always had that, but now looking back on it, it's like, I don't think I could go back to that, other framework where I just was the only one that I could, like, that I had to do it, and now with the guru herself, with Terry Spohr, with,
that is
having Bob
awesome.
on, and, and having that tag team approach that, we've been able to, to do within Housing Residence Life. I think it's been nice because you know, it's, I've tried to invest myself within the campus community, these past 11 years. And I think it, in small ways and maybe some bigger ways, you could see that. But I think it's good to know that, like, I always want students to know that there's more than just me on this campus that cares about
Yeah.
you. And it's just because that the commitment that I put out there is, I really feel it across the board from our staff and faculty. And I think that
Yeah.
you would probably say that as well, John, that I think it's important, I think it's great when we can build those very strong connections, and where a student knows, okay, I can always count on Tim, and at the same time, there's students that, they're probably not the biggest fan of me, because I've said no to them, maybe
Yeah.
for the first time in their life. And and that
Yeah.
can be that's a tough thing to swallow sometimes,
Yeah.
but I think what I've always tried to do is that, like, you try to find that way to say, okay, I may say no, but this is why I'm saying no, or like,
Yeah.
this is why I'm saying, hey, if you keep doing this, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Like, this is why you're getting into trouble, and so
Yeah.
I think we've tried to always have that development piece of it too, to say, you know what, hey, like, this is why, like, I'm saying no, or I'm putting my hands up, like, whoa, hey, hang on there a second, bud. Like, let's talk about this.
That leads into another question about saying no.
Yeah.
I've seen your schedule. A day in the life would be a full gear 24 hours basically for you.
Yeah.
So what allows you to say no? What gives you that justification to say no? Not just at a time management sense,
Yeah.
but when someone's trying to leverage you in some way. I mean, just in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. And I think that, I think for me, that question goes both professionally but also personally too, I think, and I think if you, for me, like, if you find a job that becomes much more than a job, it becomes a lifestyle, that the personal and the professional kind of bleed into each other a little bit for me. But I think, saying yes and saying no is really about setting up those healthy boundaries. I think it's learning to say, okay, yeah, like, I really need to say yes to this, or like, I don't really need to be a part of this. I can maybe tap someone else that I know would do good in it. I think it's about understanding, like, again, like, I'm only one person. As much as I might be able to, like, run 24/7, there's only, physically, mentally and emotionally, there eventually I'll hit a wall, and that's not going to be good. That's not good for me. That's not good for the people that, I'm trying to work with or help. And so I think, it's understanding, okay, I don't want to scrape myself too thin, but I want to be able to effectively do things. Now, I can tell you that I've been better at that at certain times in my life, where it's just like, what,
Yeah.
I just gotta buckle up and, and be ready for the bumpy road, and I think, and understand that, like, okay, there's going to be some times where it's just, what, we just got to do it. We got to go through it, and, and kind of just work towards those goals. But at other times it's like, what, I have a team, behind me, and, like, let me allow them to shine, in a different way. Maybe they haven't been able to, and I can say, what, I've done, my time in that community, or, like, I've gone to that, event before. It's like, what, let someone else have that kind of moment, with our students, or, and I think really understanding, okay, what, I think, again, it comes back to what we were talking about before, is like, what are those priorities, that are important to the role and to myself, and I guess, at a large part, to the institution, and, what do I feel invested in, and,
Yep.
like, is it something that I want to say, yeah, no, I really enjoy this, I want to keep this going, or, is it something where I want to step back and say, what, it's that's been fun, like, but I don't need to be at that if I don't need
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Uh,
A lot of times it was similar to me, my going from my sophomore to junior year, about the idea of letting someone, allowing someone to take that position. And as you may know, I had a lot of positions on campus, and I still
yeah,
do. So having that position to impact a lot of people is also problematic, because maybe you're not impacting a lot of people as efficiently as you could.
Yeah.
And so let's hit this sweet spot. And so, I've been to the point where I run my 24-hour schedule, and I've set a goal for myself during the semesters. I want to go to the max. I want to see where my mental breakdown is. Like I want to see how far I can go, right? And then there's a certain point where it's like, okay, but I'm not being efficient here, or like I'm getting a B minus in this class when I could really easily be getting an A. So let's gear it down. Let's find that sweet spot where I'm in the flow, and allow others to do something that I've already done. That was something for me with the KC the Future Alumni Network, was when I was helping Katie in kind of taking on that role. We found that it doesn't help to have a head and then vice, the usual organizational structure. And so we've come up with this idea of these rising sophomores and rising juniors who are going to go under the wing so that they can fill on roles and be able to be delegated, and kind of make it a much more smoother position, because most likely anyone who's in a leading position as a student has a lot on their plate already.
Yes. Very much.
It doesn't do you any good if you're in a leading position with too much on your plate. I mean, you're not really going to get much done with. You may get one activity a semester or something like that. So let's try and find that sweet spot. So that was interesting going into my junior year to kind of understand that, and that idea of delegation. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like, I touched a little bit on like that investment within an organization or something you're proud of. And then, I think the efficiency that you brought up, John, like that's a super important piece, I think, to touch on, because it's just like you got to realize like, okay, well, yeah, I can do all of this, but am I going to do the best that I can be at the level I want it to be if I'm doing all of this? And then I think you touch on a little bit at the end about the concept of legacy. It's like, you want, I think, the both of us would want the things that we've been a part of or have, created or, maybe first started, we would want those to continue on after we leave, and
Culverstein can vouch for me. I've said this before, is like, if I've ever been in like I wouldn't call it high stakes, isn't a good description of it, but just something that's meaningful, a meaningful situation where I'm trying to impact somebody, I'll jokingly but seriously say, like it comes to a point where I want you to be able to think of the ideal when you fall asleep tonight. Not think of me when you fall asleep tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's too much. That's too much.
But think of what I'm trying to get across to you when you fall asleep at night. That's the impact that I want to leave. That's the lasting effect that I want to leave on somebody, and hopingly that it's with good intent and good by that. But when you talk about legacy, it's about making that connection and being meaningful. And even if it's from 5 seconds of saying hello, good morning, every morning. I mean, just that little impact does a lot, because I've done like little mini experiments with Relate and whatnot. And one of the things that we've done is a good manners exercise. And I've talked about it a little bit in some other podcasts, but we gave them a week to their goal was every day they had to have 50 good interactions, 50 good manners. And so it's simply as like, hello, how's your morning? Opening the door for somebody, saying thank you, I appreciate it. Those little good manners. And so the idea of it going in was to get you aware of those little things that impact a person's day, right? And ironically, there was a thing about nonverbals, but that's not the point. the point was that those little good manners, in a sense,
Yep.
of how little they were, impacted someone else's day.
Yeah.
And it was just that easy by just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And I've done it where I've continually said good morning to people or in a workplace, and I go in one morning and I don't say good morning. I just try to feel it out, and you can sense the difference in the room. You can sense the feeling in the room.
They're like, John, are you okay? Are you doing okay today? Like, what's going on?
that good morale that keeps on with those little good manners. I always thought that was interesting.
Well, I think there's a poster that a former RA of mine gave me, and it says, big things have small beginnings. And I think it's a perfect example of that. Like, sometimes I think, and I tell the RAs this a lot, in training and kind of throughout the years, that like, we're not going to always be blessed to know the impact of what we've had on our students. I would say that I've gotten to see that, in some of the friendships that I've been able to form with, my, residents from RIT, that I was their RA for. I still play fantasy football with my last group of residents from my senior year there, and they still consider me their RA, Curly Man, Tim White, and so, but I tell them, I said, we're not going to always know the impact that we have on someone, but know that the little things that you've done over the course of a day, a week, a semester, a year will have a difference. They may never tell you that, they may never show you that, but know that that's what we're creating and cultivating right now, as those little differences, and I think it's interesting that, because if you look at like housing and residence life professionals, when I first was applying to jobs during college, for after graduation, it's kind of like, okay, you're really just an RD at a place for like 3 years. Then you got to move on for a different experience and switch it up and everything, and I was like, okay, like understandable. Like, if you're constantly learning and growing, there's still, there's still things, it's not stagnant, and so I always kind of ask myself a couple of questions every year that, I process, and then I kind of think through to say, okay, is it, can I still stay at CUCA or should I move on? And that question was like, the first question and most important is like, have I made a difference in the lives of our students, small or big, this year, and if I can think critically on that and say, yeah, like I think I have, and here's some examples, or like, and that second question is like, in the sense of, well, have I learned something from CUCA College this year? Like, have I learned something from the profession? Have I learned something from a student that's, shaped, oh yeah, I really need to interact this way, or I need to, reframe my, my focus. Then I think, kind of that last question is like, that concept of, value, it's like, do you feel valued, in the role that you're in and everything, and I think for me, I've always been able to feel the student value, but I think, for someone that's not living housing residence life every day, you may not you may not know what's going on, or, you may, not have someone above you that like, oh yeah, Tim, I totally get you, you're connected, but like, I have no idea what you do on a daily basis. And that's completely understandable, because we don't, sometimes we silo ourselves, where we don't know what's going on in the other world of the shop, and I think, so I think those have been like those important questions that I've asked myself, but I think it comes back to that legacy thing. Is like, are we doing enough that is leaving a lasting impression on someone, as you mentioned, John, and then will the work that we have done be able to be carried on, because it's not necessarily the person, it's not the person that is the key thing, it's the work that they've done that has represented the college or a department or, things like that.
I'm a big guy into quotes, and so what you just touched on, Will Smith said it best. He said, I want people to remember my name, and it's not that I want them to remember me, but I want them to remember what Will Smith, the ideal, holds. I want them to know what it stands for.
Gotcha.
And so he said that in an interview a very long time ago, but that has really touched on me. And so when it's interesting when people say my name or know my name, I want to make sure that it's the values that I hold. Like when I hear Tim White, I hear that's the man who I can count on. That's the guy who when shit hits the fan, when when you have a bee infestation in the outside of your bedroom or something crazy like that, I know that if I go to this man, he can help me out. He can dig me out of the hole. So that's the ideal that is held with you on campus. And I find that fascinating for people who have the fortunate opportunity to impact somebody. They have that value in them, which I find that fascinating because it's a diamond in the rough. It's a very how do I put this? A process that takes a fortitude of good intention. If I said that correctly.
Yeah,
I think that would be the best.
Yeah, I appreciate the sentiment.
Yeah,
I think. Well, I think the thing too is that, like, I think it's, it's that fortitude of attention. It's those values that you represent, and then I think it takes, I think it takes time, too, in a sense, and I think it because, you could do it like, this way this week, but then if you change your, tune the next week and and there's not that consistency, then it's like, okay, well, like maybe that's not who, Tim is, or maybe that's not who John is, and I think it's that, that not necessarily length of time, but I think time in the sense of like, consistency or things like that. And it's interesting. When you were talking, it brought up a story when so Eric and I are our college chaplain. We lead our alternative spring break, and and I remember one trip specifically because I had some we had some. It was the trip went incredibly well. It was to Southern Illinois, and it was an environmental conservation trip, and we worked with the Touch of Nature Environmental Center at the Southern Illinois Carbondale campus, and it was like building trails, and so it was a fully outdoor experience, and we learned a lot about ourselves and then how to work with each other and build trails, conserve, be very conservation minded, in nature and the outdoors. And there was, every evening we got to do a fire within like the lodge that, we were staying next to. And, a student and I were talking about like, happiness, and we were talking about, how do you stay happy? How do you work through it? How do you know that that's real? And that's why it's important. And then, we got talking, later the night as a group in a conversation of like, where, this student was sharing, it's like, Amanda Wickham, joined us as one of the leaders on the trip. And so it was Eric, Amanda and I, and, he's just like, yeah, every time I would see, Eric and Amanda, big smiles, very happy in Dahlstrom, like, very, just awesome to, connect to. You could always go up to them, give them a hug, shake their hand, like have a conversation. Then when I would see Tim, it would just be like, ooh, like, he's having a rough day, we're like, I don't want to talk to this guy. He's scary, but it's just like, and then I go on this trip and shoot, I should have been talking to Tim the whole time. Like, it was like so nice, like, and just like so gregarious, and it's just, and it's interesting. I always find it funny that like, I love experiences like the alternative spring break, or, Dr. Koberstein and I got to, he was one of the leaders and I was one of his co-chaperones when we went to Germany and Switzerland. And, and I really was blessed to go on that trip because I got a great friend out of it, and Dr. Koberstein, and one of our alums, who is an RA for me and one of his students, always told us separately and individually, like, oh, like you two got to hang out. You really get along. Like you guys would have a lot of fun. And then we finally found that out. And we're like, yeah, Beth, you were right. But I think it's, that first impression, or like that, as you said, John, like, I might be busy or like in the groove or focused, and it's like, those little things, sometimes that you miss, or like if, they didn't hear maybe what they wanted from me, and I was still, very polite and all of that, but maybe they just didn't see it. But I think that story always makes me laugh when I think about it, where it's just like, they had the same interactions as they would with me, in Dahlstrom, but it was more intentional and more intimate in the sense because it was just a small group of us rather than a whole campus. And then it was funny where it's just like, oh shoot, I should have been talking to this guy the whole time, just like a funny, like kind of those funny like aha moments almost. You're like, oh man, I missed out, or like, oh, like I've now had the opportunity to see, oh, Tim is actually a human being, it's just not a robot, that they've created at KUCA. So.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. Now, kind of switching gears, we talked about your calendar. You're basically, I would say, a 12-hour day. But how do you usually spend that day? What do you usually do during the week, and then when you're free on the weekends?
Yeah, so I think I was looking at some of the questions you were asking, and I think Google Calendar, or like as you can see right next to me, my notebook. I use those very purposefully and very intentionally. And if if a student ever asks me, it's like, what should I do? It's like, well, like this is what I do, and you should see if that works for you, because I think the important thing that I've learned is that, like, not only do you schedule those important meetings that are happening regularly on a day-to-day basis or monthly or weekly, but at the same time you're scheduling those important leisure moments or those important down moments as well, because if you don't schedule it, they may not happen, or if you don't schedule, you're not giving it the weight that it really deserves, and so for me, it's a simple thing of like, oh, I'm going to schedule, hey, leaving for Syracuse to go see my sister and nephew, or like heading to Syracuse to see my girlfriend, or like having some dinner with good friends tonight, or having some dinner with colleagues, and I think it's it may and I always joke with students when I get the opportunity to talk about this, is that like it may sound like silly or trivial to like, oh, I don't need to do that, like I'm gonna eat dinner, Tim, I'm gonna go to sleep, I'm gonna like have breakfast. It's like, yes, that's true probably, but like I am guilty of it, like where if I don't stop for lunch, I may just work through lunch, or a student might come in and I'm going to meet with them, it's like eating is important, but sometimes we forget about it, or it's just like, or I'll get to
we've been to the point where I ask you like, hey man, like you're busy, you want me to go like grab you something from the geyser, or like,
and I think it's that simple gesture of like, like, John, like that's awesome, like I don't want to make you do that, but like, but then there's probably some days, that it might be like, you know what, John, that's actually not a bad idea. Here's my ID, like, say Tim sent you. If they give you a slap on the hand, you can slap my hand when you come back. But I think it's important though, like it's, not only, for you to check yourself on that, but like to have those surround you to say, you know what, hey, I'm going to keep you in check too and everything, because that's important, So I think
I think you made a great point about planning your leisure time, because part of one of the things that they have to do in the time management sense is to select one of their 3 styles that they would like to instill for themselves for the first semester, which is basically I've I've recognized that there's kind of 3 types of gears that students may have for scheduling. There's like the laid back, where you have the classes scheduled, and maybe you have the test dates, or maybe just the test dates are in your mind, and then the athletics are in your mind, and if you never really had a schedule, maybe that's something just to get you through. And then there's the in the game, so to speak, and so that's when you have your test dates scheduled, you have your practices scheduled, and using most likely Google Calendar is what we've seen that's the best and the easiest, the most user friendly. And then there's the out front, which is planning part of that leisure time, planning when to do assignments. Even if you don't have an assignment for that week, but during that time, if I need it, that's what it's fit for. And it's the same with that leisure time. Like I take pride in my YouTube time. I have a YouTube time at like 8 p.m. or whatever. And when it hits 8 p.m., man, I don't care what's happening. I'm watching YouTube. That's my time to myself. And so we also instill a wind down time. And so 15 minutes before it's supposed to be sleep time. One of the things that I take pride in is wind down, is where these 15 minutes, when I walk into my bedroom and I close that door for the 15 minutes, I've spoken to probably 100 people today. I don't want to hear anyone's voices inside my head. I don't want to hear I don't want to talk about what happened today. I don't want to continue my thought process on it. I just want to shut it down and talk to myself. I just want to be alone with myself for a good 15 minutes before I sleep. And the benefits of that are unbelievable.
Oh, 100%. Well, so, I think it just shows you that, like, it's important, like, even, I think sometimes, you get connected to your phone so much where it's just like, unless you like, have that blue glass, if you wear glasses or like, like it's
right here. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's if, it takes, I think it's been noted scientifically like that it takes you so many, set minutes once you stop looking at your phone for you to fall asleep. But it takes less minutes, like if you're reading a book, to then fall asleep, because like screen to paper might be different, and I think that wind down time is important. And I think it's like not only scheduling that leisure time that I would say is important, but like maybe just like a 5-minute, breath break, where you just pause, you say like, right before a test, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm just going to disconnect for 5 minutes. I'm going to just like focus on my breathing, or I'm going to, just, say a prayer, or I'm going to just meditate on this, or I'm going to like review like my cheat sheet, real quick, but take 5 minutes just for yourself, where it's like you turn your phone over, maybe you close your book, and you just have that time where it's just like, okay, like that's it. Everything else melts away. You disconnect from all those hundreds of people that you've talked with in a day. And you can just say, okay, I gotta like, just tone it down, tune into myself. On that same ASB trip, the director that we worked with, Steve, talked about, you have to breathe out your crazy Uncle Henry, and there's always that stressful person in your life that like just adds to it. And everyone, if we asked anyone right now, they could tell you right, probably in 5 seconds, okay, who's the most stressful person in your life? Boom. Okay, there you go. Yeah. And then you think about that person, you kind of put them right in front of you, like at the end of your nose, and you think about that person, you get them right out in front of you, and then you take 3 big deep breaths. And on that third breath, you finally just breathe them out, breathe that person, breathe that stress right out. And then, if you're focusing intently on that, like, it's incredible. Like when we did that exercise that day, it's just like you feel kind of a small weight just like melt away, and I think, but yeah, I think that's become super important to me, that like scheduling that leisure time, or that wind down time, or those breaks, because if you don't, the only person you're hurting is yourself, and you're not going to necessarily get them.
And this campus is infamous for the KC self-care. I mean, when we run KC self-care, we do it, I think we do it 2 or 3 times, I believe 2 or 3 times a semester. Coberstein does it. And when that happens, it's always good, because it's set so that they don't hit that third block, so they don't hit that third fall off. Usually the 2/3 in the semester, the grades will start to drop, and so you want to try and alleviate that as much as possible. And so that's why we instilled that KC self-care, so that we can get them out. And it's fun to do it on social media, but at least they're out kayaking and not like stuck in their room struggling with their OT paper, So that's always good. I mean, you need that leisure time, especially.
You do.
And not only for yourself, but just to connect with friends and make some memories.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times that I've been lucky enough to hold as many positions and then have that leisure time where I can just be with my boys and just hang out and just relax. It's like they joke around with me. It's like, oh, now you're making time for us. But it's funny. It's like, yeah, all right. So be lucky for it.
Get off my back. I'm here now. Huh.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little about procrastination.
Yeah.
Even though we have deadlines and whatnot, we can always procrastinate it.
Yep.
And I want to ask you, what are your procrastination habits, and how do you deal with them?
Yeah. I think so like if I think about like procrastination, like kind of right off the bat, sometimes it's that, and it's interesting because sometimes it's sometimes this type of work becomes procrastination for me, but then at other times it becomes very freeing, and
Uh-huh.
so like sometimes you get like that, like data entry work, or like kind of like that mode of like where you're just kind of scrubbing through data, to glean things, or making sure that like your databases are all up to date, and that can be very tedious work, and sometimes that I would say, depending on certain times of year, that can kind of be more, low radar. It's like, okay, when it gets done, it gets done. It's not like, it's not,
That's like
super, super top priority.
it's like
Um,
professors with grading.
yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah.
it's just like a task that's gotta be done.
Yeah. You got to do it. There's certain times where you have to do it. And then other times it's like, oh, I can kind of push that off a little bit.
Mhm.
Student might not be happy, but I can push that off a little.
They don't
So,
know.
but I think at times that can be very like sometimes if you get so project focused, like sometimes you need a kind of a mind freeing exercise, and I found like where that like can be very helpful. But I think the ways that like I've combated kind of like that kind of procrastination, or kind of procrastination in general for me has been like you know again kind of coming back to that calendar and like setting blocks up to say, okay, for an hour this morning, I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go through emails, or this an hour this afternoon, I'm gonna do data entry, and I say, okay, well, let me see what I can tackle within this hour, focus on that drill, and then I can say, okay, it's hit the hour mark, boom, okay, wrap it up and put it to a side, and
Mhm.
then say, okay, this is what I got left in it. Then do I need to in 2 days schedule another hour block, and do that? And I think specifically, I would say even like during this pandemic mindset, I've used that a lot, just with even to keep kind of the, because we still had meetings, but they were different, and then it maybe
Mhm.
they were not as often. And so I would set, blocks of time to say, oh, I'm going to focus on, the housing selection, for tonight, this hour in the morning, or I'm going to focus on, making sure I connect with Terry on reconciling all of our, numbers and everything,
Yeah.
and block off my calendar. Maybe it's just even for me to know that, like, okay, I'm going to go through emails, this morning. Okay, I'm going to check in with this person this afternoon, and just use that as a way, as a tool, almost as a self check-in, but to help me kind of debilitate, break down that procrastination that might kick in. If it's like, that can wait till tomorrow. It's like, nope, like it's on my schedule now. Like I got, I
Yeah.
need to
You're
own this for
somewhat
myself.
you're with the schedule, you're somewhat obligating yourself to do it.
Yeah,
You're somewhat giving, you negotiated the time
yeah,
to set it
yep,
off. You've confirmed it, follow through with it.
yeah, yeah,
One of the analogies that I use is is like, you don't want to be your own servant, so to speak.
mm,
So let's say you were working for yourself,
yep,
and you know that there's certain things that you aren't going to do, and so if you try and work yourself as if you were a boss, you might as well fire yourself, because you're not going to be a good employee and you're not going to listen. So
yep,
why don't you just negotiate with yourself? Why don't you
yeah,
ask yourself, hey, what if I could have it this way? If I could have it a certain way,
yep,
how would you want it? Say, okay, I could. If I'm selecting it, then I can have it any way that I want.
yeah, 100%.
So let's follow through with that way.
Yep,
Since I've confirmed it, and I've decided to have an hour meeting with Terry, and because I put that aside,
yeah,
or whatever, if that is a study habit or whatnot.
yeah,
Um, One of the good study habits that we talk about is for eliminating procrastination, because you know how students will go to the library on Sunday if
yep,
they got a big test on Monday, right? And they'll go to the to the library for like 6 hours, and they'll say,
yeah,
"Yeah, I studied." They'll say, "Yeah, I studied for 6 hours today." It's like, oh man, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. I know you're hanging out with people for
Yep.
about 5 hours, and then maybe you did maybe 35 minutes of actual work when you
Oh,
weren't
extra
on your
study.
phone,
Yep.
right? And so one of the study habits that we try and explain to people is to do 15 minutes on and then your 5-minute break. Just get up, walk
Yeah.
around. Go ahead, walk around, go through the little art thing, go look at the different paintings or sculptures, and then
Yep.
come back and sit down, and then do another 15 minutes, and then go
Yep.
up, walk around, do the same thing, go up the flight of stairs or do something
Yeah.
different, go talk to somebody, and then come back 15 minutes, focus.
Yep.
And in one of the modules, we have them put their phone on do not disturb. We ask them to put their phone on do not disturb, just for the hell of it, just to do it, just to kind of disconnect real quick so that we can focus our mind. Because you can tell when you've got something in your mind fluttering and you're not paying attention.
Oh yeah.
And so that doesn't help you at all.
Nope.
So let's disconnect. Let's focus solid for 15 minutes.
Well, I think that regimentation, like, is super, like that self-discipline. I think, that you captured it beautifully there, John, where I think it's like that little thing of like where you want to dial in, but, you're going to lose yourself if you do it too long, and you got to take a moment to like recharge, refocus and everything. And, and depending on what you're studying for, if that's a big end of the year, exam or a big end of the semester exam, like that might be comprehensive and that's going to cover a ton of material. There's no way that you can cram for that in one sitting, and that's not healthy. You're not going to have that for your brain. You're not going to, get that in a sense where you're going to capture all of that, and so I think it's, important to have that, like that, not only like regimentation and the breakdown of it, but then also like the self-discipline to say, you know what, I'm going to get a break in 5 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, then I'll go back to the 15-minute, boom, we're going to just move forward. Or to say, like, if a friend stops by, hey, like, give me 5 minutes, I'm finishing up this chapter, and then, come back and we'll chat and everything. Yeah. But to be that, you don't have to be a disciplinarian to be self-disciplined, and just to really, because the only person that you would be, dishonoring would be yourself and what you want to try to do.
I mean, you're going to be in a class, and even if it's an intense class for an hour, you'll probably go only, even if you're interested in the course, you'll probably only pay attention for 80% of the time during the whole semester. So you're missing out. You're going to miss out 20% of the content already in class.
Yep.
So like, you have to understand that studying, you have to try and fill that mark as high as possible, because you won't be able to study for everything.
No.
You have to learn how to study efficiently to increase that percentage that you remember.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that's, now you talked on positivity, and we can certainly talk about different modules. And I wanted to, are you good on the time?
Yeah, I think I have like 8-10 minutes before my next meeting and everything. Okay. So yeah, no, as we're scheduled and regimented, I continue to be scheduled and regimented.
Okay, then if I could ask you one last.
Yeah, question. No, yeah.
Okay, cool. So, you're good with this, with listening to students in their worst of times, I'm sure. And how do you try and react? We're talking a little bit about resiliency and about positive thinking, but how do you react with yourself when you have a negative moment in your life? What is the inclination in yourself that says, I'm going to get through it? Is it just you? Is it a mixture of support? What goes through your thought process on those events?
I think the quick answer would be, I think all of that, John. I think that, I would say that, I do a very good job, in the professional sense of like a student's really never going to know if I have a bad day. And I really stick to my guns with that, because it's like, I should always be able to be the support network for a student, but they don't necessarily need to be my support network. They need to be seeing me as a person that they can go to, the rock, and all of that. And like, they don't need to worry about my problems. Yeah, I'm a human being. I do have problems, Tim does have bad days, I do, we all do. But I think the thing that I've always tried to work towards is that, I enjoy smiling. I enjoy being happy. But I also realize that takes hard work. It just doesn't happen, and I think, one of the things that I've always tried to do is to work hard for the things that I want, and I think it's about, maybe being that, hopeful romantic, maybe being that, really, the optimist, to say, you know what, like, if I always operate from the sense that I can pull a silver lining out of something, even the worst moment, then I'm doing pretty good, but if I never can see a good moment in bad, then I'm going to have good things pass me by all the time, and the thing that I, see about it is like, I've had incredible staffs, of RAs over the years, and if I look back at those very distinct 11 different staffs that I've had, I can tell you about all of the different RAs that I've had over the years, and I remember one RA that I had that, was very much like, when they got into their own head, it was done, and we could be having a great day and they would not realize it, because they didn't see it, and it could be like, literally right in front of their face, but they weren't seeing it because they were looking at ahead of like, oh, like, woe is me, like, that's not good. And it's just like, and one of my things that I tried to do that entire year was like, if you could just pull even a little sliver of something out of it, like, you might open a whole world of, happiness to yourself.
Of view, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that, to me, it's about, I think perspective is a super important part of like how I try to maintain that, like, what, we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. Like, but then I think it's also, I do have those very strong connections with, my friends and family that, some of them I got at KUCA, some of them I've had my entire life. Some of them, are family. Some of those are friends, some of those are friends that have become family, and I would say that an additional part of that is, however you may align, I've always considered myself someone very strong of faith, and to me that was something that I could always come back internally, from an external standpoint and recharge, and say, what, like, things happen, things happen to good people, things happen to bad people, and things happen to all kinds of people, and how do we look at the concept of like, okay, well, how do I own what's happening in my life? Because at the end of the day, I'm the controller of that, and so, you kind of think of, even though I struggle with the movie Inside Out, because I always like, I don't like what happens to that girl, in the movie. I'm like, just come on, like, we got to figure this out. Like, you guys can fight for this happiness. I always struggle with it because it's like, no. But like, I think the it's we're the the mechanics in our in our bodies, in our minds, saying, okay, like, we don't have to be, we could be mad if we want to feel something. We can be happy if we want to feel something. We can be sad if we want to feel something. And I would say that it's always been important for me to realize, what, I need to feel what I'm feeling right now. Like, if I'm sad about something, I'm going to cry. If I'm mad about something, I'm going to let that emotion go out, but in a healthy way. I'm not going to be destructive with that, but I want to like own like that feeling, but as much as I acknowledge it, I'm not just going to let it rest there. I'm going to acknowledge and then do something about it, and I think it's, Mr. Rogers, talked about like when he was in front of the Senate, trying to, honor the public broadcasting. He talked about, can I share a song, from one of the shows to the senators? It's like, what do you do with the mad that you feel? You get so mad that you could bite, and it's like, how do you recognize those emotions, but then you just don't sit in those emotions. You take the next step to do something with it, you know. And I think, to me, that second part has always been the most important. Like, I need to honor what I'm, you know, feeling, but I just can't wallow in that, you know, whether that's, you know, extreme bliss, whether that's extreme sadness, whether that's extreme anger. You know, I got to say, okay, I got to channel this into something that's going to be positive, into what we can do next.
Well, that ends on a good note right there. I can tell you that. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate your time.
By.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well, thanks for knocking on the door. It'll be I think the thing that I'll leave you with is that, you know, the virtual is very wonderful, but I will be very excited for the day that I could be in my office and you're working right outside. Because I think that's the bread and butter. That's the magic of KEWCA, you know. And I think that for anyone that has ever been, you know, a part of that magic, or a part of that family or team or college, it's like, that's like what you miss the most. And this, I think, you know, this is a wonderful way to get us back to that, I think. So kudos to you. Hats off to you and Dr. Koberstein. Give the man a virtual hug for me.
Okay, we'll do. We'll do. All right. I'll see you soon.
Okay, see you soon, John.
Yeah,
take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.